Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to be talking about Hong Kong protests in 2019, in June of 2019, and what they mean for an Andrew Yang presidency. All right, so Andrew Yang, he's continuing to do a great job just spreading the word. We're all really excited about what he's going to do in the debates. We're ready for him to punch through the top. We're ready for Biden to topple himself. And then probably Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to take enough strips out of each other that that Yang, the underdog that nobody expected, to kind of stand on top of that pile, because it's continuing to get it's just daggers out every day politically. It's amazing some of the things you're seeing with 25 candidates in the mix right now. All right. When Yang punches through the top, when he has won the general, on January 20th, 2021, when he becomes president, absolutely one of the top three problems he's going to have is China. China is becoming a huge American problem, right? And really, it's always been there. It's always been an American problem. And I think what's happening is the Hong Kong protests highlight the problem that's always been there. Okay, so let's talk about the Hong Kong protests. Hong Kong protests are pretty incredible. Here's the flow. So the Hong Kong protests that are happening right now were specifically sparked from a Taiwanese murder on Hong Kong land. So this guy comes over from Taiwan, murders his girlfriend who was pregnant, and then the Hong Kong law enforcement is like, okay, logically, we extradite this guy back to Taiwan. Taiwan punishes him, right? They can't do that because China does not have extradition with Taiwan, okay? And the reason why is China, this is my opinion on this one, this is the best I've been able to piece together. China really feels it already owns Taiwan, so it doesn't really recognize Taiwanese independency, right? So it's one of the reasons why they don't have extradition, right? So Hong Kong's next step is, okay, we got this murderer, so we punish him here for this murder, right? And the reality is, you're like, no, that's not right, because Hong Kong doesn't have the authority to punish someone who is not a Chinese citizen, right? Okay, all right. So you have this huge problem, okay? Now, Hong Kong is unusual within China. China and Hong Kong exist in a system called one country, two systems. Hong Kong still has democracy. They have democracy because they were led by Britain for well over a century, okay? Britain gave Hong Kong back to China. China didn't shut down Hong Kong's democracy because Hong Kong shines as a proof of capitalism, right? Now, China hates that, but Hong Kong has major aspects of capitalism, and so it outshines every single earning city in China by factors, right? Like, Hong Kong is a money engine. Hong Kong is absolutely a money engine, right? It's just, and that a better way to say it is, I would say it's a money faucet, and it's just raining down money into the Chinese economy, right? Now, all the Chinese need to do to end democracy in Hong Kong is just, crack down and give them the same horrible government. We'll talk about that in a little more detail in a moment. The same horrible government, policies that China already has all over the rest of China, right? But they know that turns the faucet off, right? Then Hong Kong performs at the same lackluster performance as every other single terrible non-producing city within China, right? So China doesn't want to do that. They don't want to shut down democracy. They don't want to shut down capitalism because they know it's a money faucet, right? All right, so here's where we're at, right? So basically, China has allowed democracy to continue in Hong Kong, right? And they allow this under one country, two systems, okay? But right now what they're saying is they got this murder issue, and this is serious, like, because it's so tragic, and it's so clear that someone needs to be punished, and it's so clear that the current system is making sure that criminals are not, that people who are accused of, that if there was a criminal act, those criminals are not going to be punished, right? That China says, okay, let's fix this. We're going to establish extradition from Hong Kong to Taiwan, but because they're Chinese politicians and because they're politicians, they're like, we're also going to do Hong Kong extradition to China, right? And that's why you have the protest today, right? Hong Kong people don't want to have their acts of democracy, which they're like, oh, hey, I don't like XYZ in China. And then China extradites them and punishes them like any other Chinese citizen, right? So Hong Kong is protesting because they don't want to be treated like every other Chinese citizen. Well, wait. Okay, so here, all right. So America comes in and they go, yay, Hong Kong protesters, we support you. Look at you, shiny young people, crying out to retain your democracy. We support you, right? And the media is in support of the Hong Kong protesters. People like Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah is perfect on this, right? So he's like, yay, Hong Kong protesters, right? Here's the part that you're missing, okay? The Hong Kong protesters, it's all on one sign, right? This is on thousands of signs in the Hong Kong protests. It says, no China extradition, no human rights, no human rights, no rule of law. There you go, right? So here's the clarity. Here's the important thing to understand about Hong Kong protest. Hong Kong does not matter in the large scheme of things and should not matter to American Democrats, right? If the American media and American Democrats and American activists and American progressives care about Hong Kong, they need to understand that Hong Kong is the period at the end of the sentence, right? If any American media, American Democrats, American progressives are upset that the Hong Kong citizens are being treated poorly, come on, are you kidding me? What's the real story here? 1.3 billion Chinese people every day have unjust restrictions on human rights. They don't have the right to freedom of religion. They don't have the right to freedom of speech. They don't have the right to freedom of ownership. They do not have the right to pursue happiness, right? They are oppressed. Chinese people are oppressed by their own government, right? And the reason that there's an unjust limitation on human rights that the Chinese people can have, right, is because there is no rule of law. The Chinese government can do whatever it wants to whoever they want, whenever they want. No rule of law, right? And unjust restrictions on human rights. And that's the real story here. In some ways, to me, to fully understand it, who cares about Hong Kong, right? There's some people in one city who are saying, we don't want to be treated like the Chinese. The American media, the American Democrats, the American progressives need to go, oh my gosh, what about the 1.3 billion people in China who are already being treated like the Chinese because they are Chinese, right? Why on earth is there goodwill being given to the Hong Kong people saying, oh, we feel so bad for you that you might possibly be treated like a Chinese person, when the reality is China, every single day, 1.3 billion people are being, unjustly denied human rights and not being given rule of law. And then here's the next step, right? The Hong Kong they're a flashlight showing us the problem. And here's the problem: capitalism versus socialism. China is a socialist country, right? And when you have socialism, we are seeing it in real time. Socialism equals restriction of human rights. China shows it every day. It shows it at a scale that no one else in the world is showing. China is using socialism to deny human rights to 1.3 billion people, right? And in addition to that, you have a situation where they don't give them, there's no rule of law. This is huge, right? You know, like, we have systems of lawyers, right? And we go and we do battle in court. There's no rule of law in China, right? So my point today is Hong Kong is not, you know, the Hong Kong protests, God bless them. I hope they're able to do what they're able to do and keep their Hong Kong process. But I'm far more concerned that there are 1.3 billion people who are having their rights restricted because of socialism. And capitalism has to remain strong in the world. America has no time for non-interventionism. And hear me clearly, because non-interventionism is quiet allyship with oppression. That is what the Hong Kong protests show super, super clearly, right? America's gotten a taste of seeing young rebels, right, fighting against an oppressive government. Hong Kong citizens fighting against the Chinese government. And that gets them excited because they like to see rebellion against, you know, of underdogs fighting against an overdog, right? Well, here's the issue, right? Okay, granted, we see your, you know, granted, American media, American Democrats, American progressives, we see your care for the Hong Kong protesters. Now extend it to the 1.3 billion people that live in China every day that need human rights, that need health services, that need freedom of religion, that need freedom of expression, right? That's my point. As the American media, the American Democrats, the American progressives cannot be so stingy with who gets their sympathies, right? If you have sympathy for Hong Kong protesters, then you darn well better have sympathies for 1.3 billion Chinese who every day are being crushed under the oppressive boot of socialism, right? And that is the clear issue. Also, I'm going to say it. It's one of the reasons why I stand against Bernie. Bernie stands for socialism. To me, it is clearly allied. Socialism is clearly allied with what's happening in China. It is not a clear, solid line. Absolutely is a dotted line. But Bernie has a dotted line to China. Bernie's leadership has a dotted line to Chinese leadership. Period. Right? Like, there's just that's a fact. Right? And it's one of the reasons why I feel Bernie is so far behind and doesn't have a chance, because there are still millions and millions of Americans that understand the dangers of socialism. We see it every single day. Now, what needs to fix here? Okay, does Andrew Yang come in on day one and say, okay, that's it, we're ready to fight the Chinese? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Right? He should continue to use diplomacy. And what we as the American people need to do is we need to rise up American Lafayettes. All right. So let me explain this. The American Lafayette. All right. The American Lafayette is a young, spirited activist, just like Lafayette was in France, right? Who looks across the ocean and says, "Oh my gosh, there's a bunch of oppressed people." Lafayette looked from France and looked to America and said, "I will not stand by while Americans are oppressed by the British." We need American Lafayettes right now. We need young activists, young activists in America saying, "Oh my gosh, I see what's happening. The Hong Kong protesters have shined a light on the actual problem, which is 1.3 billion Chinese people being denied human rights and getting no rule of law every single day of the year." Right? Tiananmen Square, the whole nine. And I'm ready, right? I'm calling the American government now to be ready to stand up and fight with the Chinese rebels when they rise against their own government, right? We need 1,000 American Lafayettes in America today. Young activists who look across the sea and say, "I will be darned if I stand by and watch Chinese rebels be oppressed by their own government." That's the issue. Right? And Lafayette, he spoke openly. He was defiant of the French government, right? And our young activists are going to need to be defiant against the Democrat party's ridiculous non-interventionism and say there's no way that we're going to stand by and let women and children be denied human rights in the millions, right, by a socialist government. We are ready to aid them. We're calling out the problems today, and we're ready to fight tomorrow, right? And right now, there need to be systems getting ready to put American Lafayettes on Chinese ground, right? So that when the Chinese rebels rise up and say, that's it, when Hong Kong protests sprout in every city in China, there need to be American Lafayettes on planes ready to aid them, right? Rather than right now having young activists in America singing the praises of socialism in America. We have a major disconnect, right? Now, all I think Andrew Yang needs to do is be ready to listen. Do the American Lafayettes rise up? Do they appear? If they don't, then frankly, I think it is possible for him to do nothing real except diplomacy during his period as presidency. But if there are 1,000 American Lafayettes, young American activists who cry out the oppression of the Chinese people in America and say we need to be ready to zip right over there, jump right onto their land and help those young Chinese rebels fight when it's time to overthrow the Chinese government. And that's what he needs. All he needs to do is listen, right? And then when those activists do that, when they take action, then at that point, just like the French government got in line with Lafayette, the American government under Yang will need to get in line with the American Lafayettes going to China. I think that's a model that works because it comes from history. We know it works, right? It's not, us asking our government to do something. It's our young activists pointing the way in the correct way. And frankly, just in case you're aware, America wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Lafayette. He was absolutely critical in getting French support for the American Revolution. And the American Revolution, without a doubt, would not have succeeded without the support of the French. So that's my point, is that if you care one lick for Hong Kong protesters, just take your sympathy 1 foot to the right, okay? And realize the real problem is not that a few citizens in Hong Kong might be subjected to Chinese rule, right? Because they're sent from Hong Kong to China. The real problem is that 1.3 billion Chinese are already under socialist oppression. And we as America need to be extremely ready to step in and stop that as soon as our young activists have corrected their actual deepest sympathies for entertaining socialism on American grounds and realize, oh my gosh, socialism really means no human rights for women and children. And in addition to that, no rule of law, and are ready to do the American Lafayette. That's what it needs to happen. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion. Please let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.